And now we will assemble the SSR90 back together, and we will take on where we left off, and that is completely disassembled gun. Let's start with the gears right here. Like I mentioned in the disassembly video, it's a very good idea to keep all the shims where they belong, so that's why you need to disassemble it carefully, because reshimming the gear, it takes some skill, and you should probably give it to an experienced tech at this point. If you lost it, if you're not sure where what is, then just get professional help. But if you still have everything in place, that's good. We will be able to put it easily together. So I'm gonna start actually not with this gear, I'm gonna start with the middle gear that sits between the two, this one. I'm gonna check, I have my shim there, and there is one here as well, because they can stick on either side. So I'm gonna carefully place it in its spot. I'm gonna make sure that it turns freely. Now we can take the sector gear, and I'm gonna put it also here, and I'm gonna orient the teeth downwards because I don't want it to catch on the piston later. And before I put these two pieces back in, I'm gonna actually assemble the rest of the gearbox, because this wants to jump out, and it's way easier if you wait until the end. So we will put the piston back in, nozzle goes on the cylinder head, tappet plate engages with the nozzle so that it's moving like this. I'm gonna somewhat place it in there, push the tappet plate forward. Be careful that you don't lose this shim. And now we need to get the spring inside. Just like that. And now, to test if the spring is in there properly, you can push the nozzle, and you see the tappet plate moving, and it should go back in place. Now we know the spring is where it should be. Make sure the grooves on the piston are aligned with the grooves in the gearbox or the gear shell, just like that, and that it slides freely back and forth. Now we have most of the inside in place, and we can now put the motor gear back in. Now I'm gonna put the reverse stop back in place, put it under tension to make space for the motor gear, and put the motor gear back in place in the bushing, like that. And now to hold it in place, I'm gonna use a screwdriver, place it from the bottom, just like that, which will hold it in place. Now I can clamp it together. So I'm gonna take the other half of the gearbox, and I'm gonna close it. Just like that. And now I'm gonna align all the bushings and all the gears correctly. Just like that. All of these are in place, and I can close it with this bent metal plate. Just like that, and now it will not jump out. Now it's time to assemble the motor and the shell for the motor. I'm gonna take the shim that is on the back out. Just slide it in there from the back so that the spring is engaged here. And now you have to check, because it will be sitting with the gearbox like this. Here there should be the red contact, and here the negative, the -1. Don't forget to put the shim back in place. just like that. And don't forget that there is this hook, so you need to move it slightly and then it actually slides in place, and now this won't be separated anymore easily. Okay, we can put this back here, and here we can connect it with the screw. So now we should have these two screws in place, and the rest will go after we put the trigger assembly back in. So here we have this one, and this one. This is why it's important to keep the screws organized. Don't over tighten these screws. Again, as always, you don't want to damage anything, especially the thread. And also, if you over tighten it, it can happen that the gears will be squeezed too much together and there will be too much friction. So use a reasonable amount of force. We have one more screw here on the top. Now I like to check if everything is moving freely. The nozzle with the tappet plate. This is perfect. And here I see one more screw that I actually forgot to put in the motor shell or the cage. So I'm just gonna put it here. Not a big deal. Okay, now it's secured in place. And now the disconnector from the other side. The little spring goes in between the gear box and the disconnector. Put it there like this and secure it with the tiny little screw. And now our gearbox is finished. We just need to connect the motor cables and we will be ready to put it back in place. So now, if you just noticed that here it's the red one and here you have the black one, maybe you can still connect it, but it would be better to just remove the cage and reorient the motor. In our case, we have it correctly, so I will just plug the cables in, put them underneath these little prongs that are kind of holding them in place so that they just don't fall out when you're shooting during the game. And the gearbox is done. We can put it back in, or now we can basically put the spring in, depends. You can do it both ways. Just gonna put the spring back in. Just like that. Now the cover. And now it's time to put it back in place. It should slide in easily. You shouldn't force anything. Basically kind of like a free drop or almost free. Okay, just like that, it's in there. And now we put this plate back in. Just route the cables through the inside. The top part goes first, and now you need to hook it right here on the bottom, and you can push it in place. Okay, and now just tighten the screws. Okay, now it's in place and we can assemble the final part, which is the hop-up. So I'm gonna take all the parts, put the hop-up bucking on, and it doesn't really matter in which orientation you put the bucking in because it doesn't have a knob, so it's a flat one. Now it's very important not to force it at this stage because you could damage the bucking. Now once the barrel is flush, you can take the red knob, put it here from the top. Now the black piece goes in there. Here we have a curved surface that goes onto the knob. Just squeeze it in there. You can hold it there with your finger. Now the adjustment wheel. Slide it on there, and finally you can lock it in place with the key, and it just clicks in place. Try if everything is nice and firm where it should be. You can look inside, try to adjust the hop up. In my case it looks perfect. Maybe I can also show you. Maybe you can see a little bit. So this looks good to me. And now a little spring inside of the barrel, sideways, push it in, turn it, and it will stay in place. Slide it forward. And now we just need to test fire it if everything works. So I'm gonna connect the battery. Perfect. Now you just assembled your SSR90. I hope this video helped you, and I will see you in the next one.